Michigan music lovers. This is Scott Baker, musician, music journalist, and producer, welcoming you to the Michigan Music History Podcast, covering all the territories of the Mitten. We cast from around the block of the brand new Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Bay City, Michigan, in the heart of the Great Lakes Bay region. And I'm joined by Michigan music royalty, sitting to the left and right, Dr. J. Gary Johnson of the Michigan Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and MichiganRockandRollLegends.com website, and Sir Fred Reif, Michigan music author, publisher, manager, and musician. Together they have taught, lectured, traveled, hosted, and have been quoted worldwide on all things Michigan music. Chances are you stood next to them at the record store or shoulder to shoulder at concerts over the years. They are the record crate diggers and the library microfishermen that have dug around for the details, the credits, and the lineage that has been part of the backstory of Michigan music. So grab your favorite beverage, hit the cruise, and take a trip back with us as we open up a can of earworms on Michigan's rich music history.
Welcome to the Michigan Music History Podcast Show, channeling through all styles and eras of Michigan music, from before you were born up through this very minute. And now, your host, Scott Baker.
Hey everyone, we just want to give you the wrap-up to both the Mike Johnston and the David Asher episodes. In the Mike Johnston one, I'm going to start with some pre-clips of the show that we kind of talked about his submissions to the MC5 movie that never did come out, as well as my love for the Northwoods Improvisers. And then we'll break into the rest of the story from last week's podcast. And to wrap it up today, we're going to have our wrap-up with David Asher, where Sir Fred and Dr. J bring in their album picks of the week, and we're going to talk about Steven Springer, calypso music, Steven Springer's relationship to both David and to Sir Fred, and how the reggae music fits in the Michigan scene. We hope you had a great listen, and we hope you tune in for the next time, and thanks again for listening to this special follow-up podcast. Mike, you know me, I adore your music. I love this. This stuff to me, Northwoods music, when I've played music my whole life, but as an upcoming musician, Northwoods was a game changer for me. And just knowing you guys and knowing that you were locally here, and I mean, I've always had that side of me that's the free side, the jazzy side, and my little bit of knowledge of that side, and that I think that's an anchor. It's kind of like the blues on the other side.
Sure, right. I agree. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing you and I have always been able to talk about. Right. Did you ever get to see the MC5 documentary that Wayne put the kibosh to?
I actually contributed a lot of posters and stuff.
Did
to
you?
that.
Oh, yeah. I got a good copy of it.
Yeah, Lenny Sinclair gave me a copy of that. Yeah.
Wonderful. I've never met her, but I did shoot a show with her.
They misspelled my name at the credits. So
did they?
Yeah, but I was in touch with I can't remember the guy's name. The artist of Chicago, True Testimonial, that one. Yeah. I was I donated all kinds of posters and 45 covers and all kinds of things for that at the time. So.
Hey, I noticed on a couple of your albums, this guy is on it.
Yeah, Farouk, right, yeah. He's
Third Man Records reissued this.
Yeah, right, I did know
That's why I haven't even opened it
yet.
I'm doing a project with them.
Right, yeah, I know.
They gave me some of these.
I know those guys, and Ron DeCourt, the guy that recorded that.
Tony Holland played in a band with me.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
I see. Goes on.
Yeah, I played with him, a few times when I was
great,
with
man. I love.
Yeah.
Because he moves. He's a good.
Yeah.
He just all over the place.
Yeah, great musician. And McMurray played, with Rolling Stones and all kinds of people since. So.
And now for our follow-up part 2 with our interview with Mike Johnston.
Roy Brooks was an amazing drummer. Played with Mingus and all kinds of folks. Horace Silver.
I think he even did an album with Mr. B.
Okay.
Braun.
Okay. Wouldn't surprise me.
Player.
Yeah. I saw Roy Brooks many times. I saw him with Randy Weston and have his own bands in Grand Rapids and stuff. He was spectacular and kind of died a tragic death. That's kind of a whole other story. It was pretty well documented, I think, in an article. I'm kind of spacing out on who wrote it or how you might, turn that up. But I know like Farouk spoke really highly of Roy Brooks as just being a master drummer, just unbelievable musician.
Did he die in prison?
Yeah, I think I again, he had some mental breakdown that wasn't diagnosed properly, and I think he got put in prison instead of like got help he needed, and it was just kind of like one of these things that just unfolded all in wrong ways, and it was kind of sad. I remember running into, when we were playing in Detroit one time, a woman that was making a documentary film of him, and I don't know whatever became of that, but she seemed she was filming it. I think it was at the Randy Weston show. I was talking with her. It seemed like, she had things happening, but I don't really know whatever.
I wonder if there's one that's on YouTube now or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's one of the good things about YouTube is all these things that
didn't get finished, they kind of pop up.
Right. Yeah.
Do you remember a club in Detroit? It was upstairs, and I saw Rashawn Rollin Kirk there.
No,
but I cannot remember where it was. And we all went on the roof on the break.
Yeah, no, that sounds. I don't think I ever.
But he was.
Yeah, right. Unbelievable. I saw Sun Ra play in a place kind of like that, and it was like they played for a week long, and then they had a New Year's Eve show that I didn't go to that was like 5 hours long or 6 hours long. It's all I think John Sinclair and folks documented that, but yeah, Steiger, is it
Rick Steiger?
Rick Steiger, yeah, he was a big part of that. I met him, a guy named John Lockhart, and
Sun Messengers.
Yeah, and so but that was in a place that kind of sounds familiar, but I don't remember the name of the place. I got a poster for it somewhere around.
Yeah, Rollin Kirk, when he came out, he played,
Yeah, right.
know, 2 or 3 saxes.
Right, yeah.
And I was going, what in the world? But then he heard something, he's blind.
right.
And he heard, I don't know, somebody way in the back was taping the show.
Unreal.
And he stopped. And he made one of his players go back there and rip the cassette out of the guy's thing.
Right.
And he brought it up to the stage and just ripped that cassette apart. It brought everybody down.
Oh, man.
I mean, he didn't really have to do that,
right.
or do something different.
Right. Are you familiar with the Ed Sullivan theater show, Ross and Roland Kirk?
No.
In the late 60s, I think it was spearheaded by Roland Kirk, where he was protesting the fact that they didn't have any jazz or African-American music on late night television, Ed Sullivan show and stuff like that. And they were, marching and protesting outside the Ed Sullivan Theater. Wow. And finally, Ed Sullivan, somebody just said, yeah. And they gave him like a 4-minute slot or something. And like he had Mingus join the band. I mean, all these amazing players. And I didn't see it when I was younger because I didn't hear about it. They didn't advertise it. And there was just sort of like a token gesture, like, okay, get these guys off our back or something. And they just, like, I don't know, probably like 10, 15 years ago, they released a box set of all the Ed Sullivan Show theater performances, and it wasn't in there. And people really freaked out. But recently it just appeared on YouTube. And I watch it. It's really, really great. And there's really incredible players on it. And they do kind of like 2 or 3 movements of pieces, and it's spectacular. It's like a who's who of living jazz players to some degree, and it's really. But I think that was Roland Kirk was sort of spearheaded that.
I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware of that at all. I love that part of YouTube.
Yeah, right. And I was thrilled to be able to see that, because I even looked at the box set to consider buying it if it was on there, just for that. But it wasn't, and.
Does Michigan have a jazz venue that, when you say it, everybody knows it? And I mean, it's
Bakers,
like,
that was for.
I know, like you talk about Canada, or is it Toronto, the Massey Hall thing?
Right,
everybody goes. Right. The legendary albums recorded there. Is there one in Michigan? Bakers, you say?
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the oldest running jazz clubs in
Detroit?
the world.
Yeah. But there's off and on there's been cool venues pop up and disappear. Ann Arbor, when you were there,
Word of Paradise.
Yeah, it was great. And they, I saw, God, there was a PBS program called Jazz Alive hosted by A.B. Spellman, and they would broadcast live shows from New York and Ann Arbor and Detroit and L.A. And, when I was in college, I used to tune that in every week because that was like, and I sometimes I'd see Art Ensemble, and then a month later they'd be broadcasting the show, and I'd tape them off the radio.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Dang.
But yeah, Ann Arbor, I saw so many great bands in Ann Arbor. In the late 70s, early 80s, there were hardly any, name players you might be interested in seeing that didn't play in Ann Arbor, I think, in that time.
Well, there's that new club in Ann Arbor, but since the pandemic came, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. That's
the
just...
Blue Parrot?
Oh, yeah. I heard about that
like
place.
that.
A lot of people were thinking that was great. I really, for a period, Cliff Bell's I thought was really awesome in Detroit.
Did R.J. Spangler book that?
Yeah, for a while, yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice place.
That's excellent. So speaking of Michigan jazz, the real show happens to be ran by you over at CMU there, WCMU Destination Out. How many years have you been doing that now?
I think...
when did you start, I guess?
1988, I think, was when I started. I've got a tape of the original one, and it was August, I think. I remember it was pretty hot that night. I just kind of remember. but yeah, that's when I started doing the show. I was like, Robert Barkley does his Juke Joint program, and Tom Ball did Homespun, and they were all kind of independently done programs, and I did my proposal. And so, they're still both doing their shows. So I'm still kind of the young guy at 33 years doing the show. So it's kind of crazy, but yeah, it's been, really great.
Well, that's a solid Michigan radio Sunday night thing right there. Those shows all together.
It goes up to Sault Ste. Marie, all over Michigan.
Well, when I'm up in the UP at my cabin, I can turn it on and I'm hearing Mike on Sunday night. I'm like, oh, this is like being right home. You got it tuned right in.
Yeah, it's a great... Sunday nights has just been such a cool thing there for all these years. And I got interested in it when I was, again, this Jazz Alive, which was a syndicated show, and they'd play these live broadcasts. But there was a locally done program called Airplane at the time. A guy named Joe Brandt did it. I think he runs a PBS station in North Carolina now or something. It was kind of maybe geared a little more towards 20th century classical music, but he would play Sam Rivers and some different jazz things. And I really liked it because I didn't know what I was going to hear. And then when he got a job someplace else and moved away, I really missed that show because there wasn't anything to replace it. So that's kind of when I came up with the idea for my show, which wasn't exactly like his, but it was, again, just sort of, I think, trying to present artists that I think are really great that don't have a good voice in the commercial music world.
Right.
It's and even with all the technology today and doing these podcasts and stuff, I still think that a lot of the really good stuff just gets buried. It's hard to get a voice heard. It's just like there's too much now. There used to be like 4 or 5 cool blues or jazz magazines, and now it's like if you're like really interested in some kind of music, where do you turn to find it? It's like
Europe.
yeah, I know. It's true. I mean, and it's just there just aren't these like kind of cohesive things that it's kind of cool because anybody can produce music and can be heard on one level, but that's sort of the bad side of it too, because all these people that probably shouldn't be producing music are doing it, and so how do you sort out the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Right?
Yeah, it's just it's really kind of.
I also think too sometimes when it comes, especially to just particular jazz or even deep blues for that matter, there's a lot of people that are kind of scared of what they're hearing or not understanding where it's going and how to get into it.
Yeah, and
you have a seemingly a thread every Sunday night that you can hear in your bumpers heading up to it, like this, tonight we're going to do this, do that.
Yeah. And
and the other cool thing about your show is you've got 2 or 3 always on. You're able to hear it during the week,
right.
Backlogged on CMU's webpage. So it's not like if you miss it, you can still tune in, which I always thought was the greatest thing to do, and you did it. So people can go taste test that way through a knowledgeable person, you know. And
yeah, I think it's, you know, again, important for, again, you know, some of these artists that you think that they're, you know, they should be household names. I mean, most people have never heard of them and may never hear of them. And it's just too bad. Again, I realize that, you know, one of my friends that used to sell used cars, there's a butt for every seat. I realize that's true with music. You know, everybody likes something different, and that's fine. But so much of what we hear gets dictated by people that probably shouldn't be dictating that information.
Right.
When I was working at School Kids, we did there was a, you know, radio survey that come out every quarter or whatever on who rating the radio stations. And the only station that I would listen to basically down there was WEMU. You know, it was all jazz and blues, and WBCM, the community. But WEMU at the time, when they did this, only had like 5% or something like that of the audience. And I thought, wow, everyone I know listens to the station. And it's only 5%.
Yeah, I know. It when you start to see numbers, I mean, even when I started to, you know, get to know people like Chuck Nessa and the people at Coda, and they had their Sackville label there, and, you know, I started to find out, you know, well, what's your best-selling record? Well, how many did you sell? And it's like, is that all? You know, like, I thought this was this great thing, you know, like a rock record, if you don't sell 10,000 in a year, you're crap, and, you know, any jazz record that sells 10,000 is a masterpiece, you know, it's in a lifetime, you know, I mean, and it's just, I saw a statistic, you know, again, I presume it's true, that, like, say in the year 2000, 4% of all the money spent in the United States from out of people's pockets for music, whether going to shows or buying music, 4% went to jazz and blues. And, you know, rock and roll is like this massive. And in the year 2010, it was 1%.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, you know, and you just think about that. It's so small. It's in it, you know, in a way, you know, jazz and blues are like the backbone of American culture and American music. And, you know, like I teach rock and roll and jazz history classes, and, you know, most people don't know anything about it, you know, nothing, you know. It's like they should be getting this information in junior high and high school somehow, you know, and the music would be valued more. And I used to do a thing in my classes, like, okay, when you see or hear jazz on TV or however you hear it, you know, report back what the context was. And it's usually negative. You know, like there was a McDonald's like ad for a little while. This is maybe 8 years ago now, where they and a couple of young women talking, and you know, McDonald's has Mick cafes, you know, and now we don't have to go to the coffee shop and hear jazz, you know.
Used in that context, right.
Yeah, and you know, some student reported they were watching a sitcom and they were portraying the woman as having, you know, like, yelling and not saying anything, and they would just have her move her mouth and have like a trumpet solo playing, you know. It wasn't like a guitar solo, or, you know what I mean, like, and it's just, and you think about all this stuff, and I mean, you could say, you know, don't worry about it, it's BS or something, but I think it runs pretty deep, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, you're constantly being hit through your daily media, and it's being portrayed as something that is less than cool or less than good, and nobody, you know, like I find with students, if you feed them the right stuff and they open up and they listen, they like it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like you really got to be careful, because you kind of have to teach people to unlearn so many things to just get them to that doorstep, you know.
Oh, truly. And you were saying about the percentages a second ago, and it's like, now we're at the point where rock music isn't even in the ballpark of that percentage. It's so nil, they won't even run it on the Grammys.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even there. So everything is taking such a back seat to popularities.
Yeah. And I don't, you know, I suppose I'm showing my age, but, you know, so much of all the music is all synthesized now.
Yeah.
And it's produced in studios, and
it's auto-tuned and computer boosted.
Yeah. So it isn't really about real people playing real instruments and kind of, I don't know, communicating like that. And then, I don't know, that just.
Which for me is such an epic thought. Two people getting in a room and improvising.
Yeah.
Just playing, seeing what they can come up with.
Right. To me, I'm speaking to the people that know this, but it's communication. It's I think personally, getting into my philosophy, but sound is, I think words came out of sound, not sound coming out of words. And so I think sound is primal communication, somebody crying and laughing turned into a word to describe that at some point in time in whatever language. And so, that was something too, with Farouk that, he was really into mapping out like, okay, this funeral song is in, this scale in Asia, and this one is in Africa. And he was like, he was studying like universal patterns in music, like with like that. And so like, if you're taking an improvised solo, what you're saying with the notes kind of thing, like in a more profound way. And, so I think all that stuff's it's really deep. I mean, and we don't really talk about it a lot. So we don't really begin to know what sound really means or I mean, we know it touches us and moves us and things like that, but, it's, I don't know. It's like kind of what keeps me going all the time.
Absolutely. It's like the bones and your skin and everything that you're used to. Yeah. Sound is such an imminent part of what we're used to, that to sit back and think, the whole scale of it, it's
right.
It's a world in itself.
And it's a force, it's an energy, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, when like, you amplify like a guitar, it's like, it has substance. I mean, a note can, it's powerful. It's just, I think it just, again, when in the English, we don't talk about, in a textbook, we talk about nouns and verbs and pronouns and things like that, but you don't really talk about what sound does, like that, you say a word and you say it in a sarcastic tone or a genuine tone. It's the tone that carries the signal, and so, great players, like a Peter Green or something, they know how to touch the string to deliver what they want, and that's why it's, moves you so profoundly, so.
Absolutely. Wow. That was great. Anything you want to add, Fred, to our conversation here? I think we're coming to the end here.
Yeah. No, not really. I did want to mention, we were talking about, jazz sales. When I first moved to Ann Arbor in 91, why I moved there is because I got a job at Tower Records.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I remember them.
Yeah, I was one of the managers and a buyer for jazz, blues, a number of departments. And me coming from a small store, I'd order 2, 3, 5. Well, the manager of the store, because I ordered like 5, maybe 5, 10 of Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. He goes, no. You have to order about 150. And so I did.
Start adding zeros to those numbers.
And as it turns out, I think while I was there, that became one of the first million-seller jazz albums.
Yeah.
Because of you?
No,
I'm just kidding. He bought all those.
Yeah. I use that as an example in my jazz history class where, it's like I worked at record stores like you forever, and, like Bruce Springsteen or U2 or somebody'd come out with an album and you'd sell a few hundred in the first week. And then a year later, the only copies you're selling were used copies. And Kind of Blue is a record that I probably sold, and I wasn't working in Tower Records in Ann Arbor, but we probably sold 2 to 3 or 4 of those every week. I worked at a record store for over 30 years. And so I probably sold more copies of that than any record.
Wow. I know nowadays Fleetwood Mac's Rumor seems to be that weekly, daily purchase.
Yeah,
Somebody's always coming for that.
That was like one, we used to joke that was, everybody was issued a copy of that, like
when you're born, you get a copy.
Yeah. But yeah, it was like, but yeah, Kind of Blue is just, it's just, it never wears out. And there's always a new generation that, hears it and it touches them. And it just, it's just really cool because it wasn't like, here's, a million sales right out of the gate, but here's, this steady thing that just river that just moves along, you know.
Yeah, that's cool. I think Coltrane could have done that on his own with The Love Supreme.
Yeah,
but
I think that's right up there.
People don't want to, are almost, I don't know. I talk to people that don't know but are curious. I almost wonder if they don't want to touch their spiritual side of themselves or what it is. But it's like, why have you waited? You know, this is such an essential piece.
I think that it's just, all that stuff with music, you know, people, you know, they don't like, everybody likes to think they're individual and independent and they're not influenced by stuff. But, you know, if the people around them are excited about it, they'll get excited about it. And it's just, you know, it's like that kind of stepping into the water on your own a little bit and having the courage to try something. And I think when people try stuff, they're surprised sometimes. You know, I don't know what it is. You kind of build up a mental block that, you know, I'm not ready for this, or this isn't, you know, because you're imagining, you know, the unknown is kind of, people are afraid of the unknown, you know, but,
True.
You know, you kind of step into, you know, the waters, and it's, you know.
I also find pretty unique too, is growing up hearing Nighttime Jazz and Blues off WCMU as a regular radio station around town on FM, because I grew up, my first had wheels was in the mid 80s. So I just remember cruising around late at night, and the time of day, the time of head frame you're in, all that added up to my love of that. And I see that with jazz, blues, all that. It's reggae even. I mean, there's a spirit that you've almost got to be in the right frame of mind at the right time of day, and it downloads to you, and it becomes one of those private things that
resonates.
Yes.
I, you know, kind of getting back to, you know, earlier days where, you know, for me, radio, when I was a little kid, you know, like the Beatles were on TV twice a year or something, right? You know, in the Rolling Stones, and they weren't being played on the radio where I grew up. And so tuning in the radio late at night, like my parents always thought I was a good kid that went to bed on time and didn't put up a fight, but I had my radio and I was listening, you know, all night long to the, you know, and it was how I became aware and informed, you know, and learned about things. And it was kind of intimate, you know, and personal, because it was just you and the radio. And I try to remember that when I'm on the radio, that somebody described this to me once, that you're not talking to, you know, however many people are listening, 10,000 or 500,000 or whatever. I mean, I know I'm not doing that, but you're talking to individuals. Yeah, you know, it's like you're not talking to the masses, you're talking to each person, you know, and kind of keeping that in mind, that, you know, you're trying to connect like we're connecting here, and just have a conversation, and that you're bringing them into this conversation, you know.
Well, thank you, Mike, for coming.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
This has been a really incredible evening of discussion. A lot of topics. I mean, I think we could have a part 2 going to record, or talking about not just the records, but radio stations like we were discussing. All sorts of stuff.
It's so multifaceted, all of this stuff.
I'm pretty sure Mike will come back, and when Gary's here, and they can do the teacher thing and have Professor talk with us too. And you three, you can school me some more on some stuff. So I just want to thank everybody for listening to our podcast in Studio 163 here in Essexville, Michigan. I want to thank Mike Johnston for making the trip from Mount Pleasant to Essexville for this, and we know he'll be back at some point. And a lot of music, whatever you like, is out there. It's a matter of finding and digging deep into some of the good stuff. And if you get a chance,
and Michigan's a great state for music.
Michigan is a great state for music, and that's why we're here talking about it.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor anywhere you're at here in Michigan on Sunday night. Mike is on Destination Out, 10 o'clock. Tune in. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Both of you.
Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Fred. We will talk to you all soon.
All right.
Great.
And now we're going to wrap it up with the reggae episode and David Asher, and the record reviews from both Dr. J and Sir Fred, and calypso music, and how it ties in with both Sir Fred and David Asher's friend, Steven Springer. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to especially thank David Asher and Mike Johnston for their interviews, and especially for being assets to Michigan music. We want to thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of this episode. Sir Fred's pick of the week here.
The Adventures of Steven Springer. Well, anyways, this is actually all the bands that he played in.
Oh, it's a compilation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called The Adventures of Steven Springer. But there's, like the first song is called Bob and Peter.
I know that one. That's a really good one. Yeah, Bob and
And
Peter.
it's
It's a
a
reggae
song
tune.
about Bob Marley and Peter Tosh.
There you go.
Written by Brian Kennard, who Steven used to play with.
I know Brian too. Yeah, I know him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he came up, but he was originally from Trinidad.
It's just funny though, you
Lived
know.
in Australia.
You know, from being that 14-year-old kid that walked into the record store, you know, I mean, to today and everything that happened in between. It's kind of there's a lot of synchronicity there, you know.
Well, I could take it back to when I was 10. My mother bought me a RCA Victor 45 player, and with it came a box set of Harry Belafonte.
Oh, there you
Calypso.
go. Yeah.
So at the age of 10, I was into the calypsos, and I never thought 40 years later or 35 years later, when I met Steven Springer, who got me back into the original calypsos and steel drum music and Trinidad Tripoli and
Yeah, Steve
this
was,
whole scene.
he was a beautiful cat. He really was. You know, I know his wife Denise. She's a sweetheart.
Oh yeah.
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 Definitely.
Yeah, well, for the last number of years, well, when he got on School Kids, I'll tell that story. He came, this was 1992, I think, and I was just starting at School Kids in Ann Arbor, and Steven somehow got my phone number, and he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I'm Steven Springer, and I am from Trinidad, and I play with Trinidad Tripoli. And I have a CD out that he self-produced. I want to be on your label." And I thought, okay. You know, I have no idea who he was. So I told him where I lived, and in half hour he came over. And if it wasn't for him, I mean, we ended up doing Trinidad Tripoli Steel Band, Steven Springer solo album.
The Tropical Jazz. I remember that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's when he started the group Tropical Jazz. I was in that.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 albums of a compilation of different reggae and calypso bands mostly from Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Cleveland. Carlos, somebody from Cleveland, I'm sure you know Carlos.
Not
He's been playing reggae
Has he?
forever.
Yeah. I'm not familiar, I don't think. And my thing's always been so insulary. It's always been the same guys. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I maybe 4 or 5 6 guys, you know, for the last 30 years were the guys in my group. And now it's new guys. I knew Dave Ivory the whole time, but or most of the time. And but it's always been such an insulary thing for me, and we never really like reached out until like we started working with the people over in England and started, you know, bringing them in, you know. And
you know, you were talking about earlier about sending a file to a musician. Well, that's what a lot of these were made on this recording. Jeff Stevens and Steven they'd do their little part, and he'd send it to Brian Kennard in Australia, and he'd put his part, or vocal or whatever. Then they'd send it to a guy in Trinidad,
yeah.
and he'd put his part on it. And this was all new to me. And
When was that?
well, he died in 2012, so
Just before, around that time?
around that time.
And
And
it's just amazing when you can do that, though.
I
Isn't
would,
it great?
you know, I'd get to listen to it, and I'm going, "What? You did all of that? You guys?" And he would, you know, because he did it in his kitchen.
My feeling was like being like a kid at Christmas when these recordings showed up from England. You know, whether they get mailed them over to me or they emailed them. You know, and then like, you know, bringing in people like Congo Natty and people like that, and Ghetto Priest, different people that contributed to the recordings, and I would get these recordings back, and I would just be like, wow, so exciting, because part of it is part of what I really like working with Adrian is I just let him do his thing, and he's got a great way of bringing space into the music that wouldn't normally be there in our recordings. You know what I mean? He'll strip stuff right back to drum and bass, or bass and a sax or something like that. Just make room, which reggae, dub music especially, needs that room to breathe, to make it sound huge. And he is the king of that. I mean, he's really, really good at it.
That's awesome.
Good at it.
Well, Stephen passed away in 2012, and I didn't realize that he was the glue that kept that whole scene together.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because I go down there to visit, and I may run into one of the steel drummers, or used to be steel drummer. I'll say, "What's going on, man?" Not a thing.
Yeah. Well, he had so much charisma. The guy, the charisma was just dripping off that dude. He was a handsome gentleman.
And a big flirt.
Yeah. He liked
girls loved him.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, he was. I was happy to see that he made his way over to England. One of the last things I saw him do was he played at the Cavern Club.
Right.
And he played like a beautiful the guitar-only version of Imagine that he played. It was just lovely. And that was one of the last things that he did.
On his bucket list.
Yeah, that was one of the last things he did. And I was so proud of him for that. He pulled it off. He really did a great job at it. Steve was a special talent. He really was.
Was that CD, was that one of the School Kids record CDs, or?
No, it's a Black Kettle production. One of mine.
That's on your label.
Yeah, I might.
The Sir Fred's Black Kettle production.
I
wasn't told that when they made it, but
I might have sent stuff down there.
My name is all over it here.
That's cool.
I might have submitted stuff to School Kids back in the day. I can't remember. I sent out so many submissions. I sent stuff to Anu Sound that came back not asked for. So.
Thinking of that, after I just moved up here a few months ago, and I'm going through a box of cassettes, and I did find like a promo process cassette.
Oh yeah.
With your card.
Oh, you did, yeah. Well,
so maybe you did.
I might have sent it, yeah, and you probably were like, "What the hell is this?"
Well, I didn't have the final say. But.
Right. Well, you probably were you're probably showing it up, but yeah, I mean, like I said, that was an early effort, definitely. But we had the vision. We just didn't necessarily have the technology and the chops to pull off what we really wanted to do, but we got better at it over time as we got working with different producers and different musicians. It got the whole thing got a lot more honed and still edgy but polished, So that was working with G. Pierce and Bernard Terry. Those guys are both brilliant. So we worked with them through the 90s, up till this last project with Chris Lewis. So Chris is the guy we go to now, but he's wonderful. He does mostly rock music. It's not like there's a lot of reggae or world music going through his production house, but we grew together with him for over a period of years, and he does a really good job. I don't think he blows his own horn enough, and I don't think enough people are that familiar with him in the Tri-Cities. A lot of people really know Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. Andy Reid, the whole Bay City community is real familiar with Andy. I've never worked with Andy, but Chris is somebody who's kind of like a best kept secret, really. I mean, and he's been going out of state and working with bigger names. People call him in, and call him into sessions and stuff because he's getting a reputation with the right people. So that's good.
That's awesome.
Good. Yeah. And he's a good dude, a real good dude.
Gary, you brought in a record for Record of the Week. What'd you bring in?
Well, I brought the album that made me a reggae fan, and that is Catch a Fire by the Wailers. Actually, I didn't know very much about reggae music in the early 70s. I guess they really the first song that really caught my ear was I Can See Clearly Now by Johnny Nash. And I didn't realize at the time that the Wailers actually played on that.
Right.
But that was all over the radio. I love that song. And then he followed it up with Stir It Up. Mm-hmm. Again, loved the song, didn't realize that the Wailers played on it or that Bob Marley had written it. But it's kind of I found out later it was kind of an interesting story on how they got involved with Chris Blackwell. They were touring as Johnny Nash's backing band in England, and somehow they got stranded. I can't imagine, he wouldn't have paid them enough to get back home. But anyways, they were kind of stranded in England and made contact with Chris Blackwell, who had already kind of been a name in England anyway, as far as Jamaican music. Some of you might remember My Boy Lollipop.
That was his first record.
Right, by Millie Small, which came out that was right during the British invasion, and was kind of a novelty hit. Everything that came from England was on the radio at that point in time. But anyways, that started it all going. And so he signed the Wailers, gave them enough money to go back to Jamaica, and with the understanding that they were going to make an album for Island Records. And so anyways, they go back to Kingston, record what became Catch a Fire, brought the tapes back to England. And here's where I thought, this is Chris Blackwell's genius. So instead of just releasing the Wailers album as is, he had enough foresight, I guess, to think about, how maybe a way to better introduce them to the rock audience would be to add some rock guitar to the album. So he brings the album to Muscle Shoals and brings in Wayne Perkins, guitarist, and he does some soloing on Concrete Jungle, Stir It Up, and Baby We've Got a Date. And it's just enough that, for me, I'm not that familiar with reggae music. I'm a big rock and roll fan. And that just maybe opened the door a little bit more for me. But anyways, I had read about Bob Marley, and I was trying to think about it. Was it Cream Magazine, which I was subscribing to, or Rolling Stone, because at that time they really were a music magazine that had a story about Jamaica and highlighting Bob Marley and the Wailers. So I knew a little bit about it, and I found the album Catch a Fire. I believe it was at Camelot Records in the Hampton Square Mall. And when I bought it, I didn't realize how cool this album cover was, because when it's in the shrink wrap, it does look like a Zippo lighter, but it's not until you get it home and open it up, and then it's got, it opens it up like, unfortunately this fell apart, but you've got the flame in there.
It's like the holy grail of reggae albums.
Yes, it's just so great.
The original press, no.
Well, there was only 20,000 of these pressed, in the original press.
It was expensive.
Yeah, so, I kind of lucked out in getting it.
Oh, you sure did.
When the thing that really convinced me, it had a picture of the band on the back, and it also had the songwriting credits. So then I discovered that it was Bob Marley that wrote Stir It Up, which was another incentive to buy the album. And anyways, so I take it home, and, it's just from start to finish. What a great album. And, from that point on, now going and searching out other Bob Marley albums and picking up a couple reggae compilations and discovering some of these other artists from Jamaica that I didn't know anything about. So it was just great fun. And, the subsequent albums that came out have a big picture of Bob Marley on the front smoking a big spliff.
Yeah, they changed the cover art.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
and they changed the name of the band, most importantly.
Well, yeah, then
From
it becomes
the Wailers to Bob
Marley and the Wailers, right?
Which
Exactly.
kind of diluted the legacy of the original group, who had been together for 15 years in Jamaica.
Right.
On Studio One, and then with Lee Perry and all the different records that they did. It got kind of diluted by the fact that Bob took that name for his backing group, which I think really is why Bunny Wailer took the name Bunny Wailer, because he was Bunny Livingston before that. But he wanted it known that he was a Wailer, one of the original Wailers, and that's why he took that name. And, I think it's still probably getting hashed out in court, but the Marley family has the most money, so we know who's going to win that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, also, I think, by when you switch the cover, I think the meaning sort of got lost.
Right.
Where people are thinking Catch a Fire, okay, you're flicking the lighter to light that joint, when in essence, that's part of the lyric of Slave Driver.
Slave Driver.
And, Catch a Fire, again, I didn't realize this when I bought the album, but that was the real meaning was burn in hell.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, he's crying out against slavery and all the oppression and everything else that came along with, the process of slavery. And, that's a very important message that he was conveying, very early on. And of course, in subsequent albums, Bob Marley always had, some type of message that he was conveying, and usually always a very positive one. So anyways, great
fantastic.
album. And one
Double entendres are run the music. Back then, that was such a huge thing of how many things can you tie together to catch every kind of audience member you can.
Right.
And then it comes down to the truth is what it.
And, again, the other thing I guess I want to bring up about this is just the Chris Blackwell just having enough forethought, I guess, to come up with a creative album cover like this. And that, starting out in the late 60s, going through the 70s, and pretty much through most of the 80s, that is the golden age of album covers, where you saw all these really elaborate, interesting album covers, and it was like an art form in itself that's sadly been lost.
Yeah.
And even though, vinyl is making a comeback, they're not going to sell enough copies of any vinyl record to really get elaborate on the cover anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But still, you do have a much bigger palette, I guess, to make an interesting cover and make it a work of art. And that's really what a lot of album covers were, in something that was sadly diluted with the age of the CD, where it's only 1/4 the size of an album cover. And of course, in download, I mean, everything is faceless.
Yeah.
So
you don't even get details anymore.
Yeah, right.
And now you're listening to music on your phone.
Yes, exactly.
You probably got a great stereo system at home. Probably it's probably state of the art, but
it's convenient,
right? Yeah.
You've got your jukebox with you,
right,
Well, in the car now, there's no CD players.
We also made flash drives of this album.
Oh, yeah?
We stepped forward and we made a couple hundred flash drives, so people with new cars that don't have CD players can put the album in their flash drive and ride around and listen to it. So
did you do cassette prints too?
We did not do cassettes of this release. No,
that's a hip thing now too.
Yeah, we thought about it.
Yeah, but again, cassette players,
people have old cassette players, but the flash drive's been pretty sort of successful. That idea, I just wanted to cover our bases, so we did that, and people can play it on their computers and stuff. It's got it's like a little bug. And it says DAB on it. It's got a little red, gold, and green crown, and it has the DAB logo on it.
That's great.
But, that's
I love that.
Unfortunately, downloads are so insidious is that they're so convenient. They're on your phone.
They are.
They go to your computer.
Yep.
You can fool around with them. You can, shuffle the song mix.
Absolutely.
You can do everything with them.
Right.
It's just like...
They're handy, that's for sure. They help me. With my radio show, I download a lot of stuff for the show, from the label or wherever I'm getting it from, and I just take the WAV files to the studio and throw them up on the grid, and that's how we put the show together. It's not like this where we're actually sitting here and talking and playing music. Right. It's it's like an assembly line process, really, the way we do the radio show.
Yeah.
And but I should hype the radio show. It's the On You Sound Sunday Roast, the last Sunday of the month at 3:00 Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. of A. And yours truly is the host.
And this is available on YouTube?
If you go on Facebook, you go to the On You Sound Sunday Roast page on Facebook, or my page, and friend me on Facebook, or we usually
there'll be a link.
There'll be a link, and you can go on there, and
cool.
It actually streams from the boat now, the Widgeon boat. But then we put it on. We have the archive of all 53 shows on Mixcloud. Wow. So you can go on Mixcloud and listen to every one of the shows going way back to 2017 when we started. and hear the evolution of the whole program.
So
They're all there.
you're broadcasting from a boat. It's like pirate radio.
It's kind of like pirate radio. And this lady, MJ Morgan, she drives the boat, man. She drives it all through. It's a big, long boat. She drives it through all these English channels and, keeps it moored in different places. Yeah. But she's pretty awesome to be able to do that. I thought, MJ, did you drive the boat? Yeah, oh yeah. Hey, who else? And I'm like, wow, really?
That's too cool.
And the station plays 24 hours a day, and they have specialty programs like Danny Cameron has a great roots reggae program there on Sundays. It goes all day long, every Sunday. And he's a great DJ.
So you don't play any vinyl at all then?
Well, I have vinyl that I've transferred to CD that I have played on the show, but I take it over there as a WAV file because I take it all over there on a flash drive now and do the assembly line and put it all together. But in the beginning, I used to take a crate of CDs and take my time and do it that way, but it got to be so time consuming. Now I do it usually on a Sunday afternoon. I'll get it all planned out and number the tracks so I know what order they're going to be, and I just import them into the computer. They line right up, boom, boom, boom. Put the sound effects in and the voiceovers, and it takes about 4 hours to produce it. But it's been a really successful show. We've been getting plays in Vietnam and Laos and Africa and Europe and China and Moscow, and I mean the Anya Sound label has a lot of fans all around the world, but it's a niche, but the fans are very, very loyal, I would say.
Now when they go to Anya Sound, how do you spell that?
It's ON_U, the letter U, sound.
ON_U. So if you search that on Facebook or on the internet, that's where you're going to come across.
You'll come across their label, On You Sound Records, or if you search on_U Sound Sunday Roast, then you will find the radio show.
There it is, Sunday on You.
That's also on your record, right? On the behind the songs, it seemed to me that was on there.
It was produced there. They have a studio. On You Sound has a studio in Ramsgate, and that's where Adrian Sherwood mixed 4 songs on the record. And so I went over there. I guess it's been 2 summers. Last summer, not much happened last summer. I wandered a lot in the woods.
Now that was Love Ballad?
Love Ballad is one of them. Another one is Donkey Jawbone.
Right.
And then the versions. There's an instrumental version of both, or a dub version of both. So those were the tracks that Adrian mixed.
Okay, but when I downloaded them, I thought it had that behind those tracks.
Yeah, it does say On You Sound. It does.
Yeah,
it does.
Right.
Yep, it does.
Okay.
So people know where it was done.
Oh, I saw that on the Bandcamp too.
Yep. That's so people know, who did it or whatever. It's kind of not just us. Not just us.
That's cool.
Yeah, trying to get the word out a little bit more about the awesome people that we're working with.
Yeah, well, that album, like we said, just sounds so great, and
congratulations.
Hopefully, more and more people, will download it or buy it.
Well, it's a long road, like Lee Scratch Perry. He's pretty much the reggae godfather. He's 85 now, I think, and up till the pandemic, he was touring the world. He's about 5'6", and he's a short little dude with purple or pink hair, and very eccentric. But he'd been working in music since the late 50s, early 60s in Jamaica, and Adrian too now since the late 70s has been producing records. But the two of them came together for this album Hard Rain a couple of years last year, and it charted #1 on the Billboard reggae charts. So, and I got a credit. Well, the prior album, Rainford, they credited me on that. So I was really excited about being credited on a Lee Perry album and on an Anya Sound album, especially one that went to #1, So
that's
really,
wind.
really exciting.
Yeah.
That's wind.
Oh, that wind is crazy out here today, isn't
it's
it?
whipping it out
I was
there.
wondering if it was going to knock our
I
power
thought he
out,
was
but-
working behind here, but I'm hearing wind nonstop in my corner here. I'm like, oof.
Yeah, it was screaming on the way over here. It was blowing me all over the road.
Some special sound artifacts on our podcast today.
Yeah.
Well, we got any closing notes, or everybody cool? Or
Well, it's a pleasure meeting you, Gary, again, I guess. And
same with you,
Yeah,
Dave.
thank you so much. Yeah, you have a lot of knowledge. We'll have to hang out and
Definitely.
and chat some more. And Fred, my reggae father over here, Fred. Scott, my spar, I haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see you, my brother.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you so much, guys, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah. We'll talk to y'all soon. Michigan Music History Podcast. Make sure you check out the David Asher Band, DAB. Very easy to find, very easy to get a hold of, and definitely soothing to the ears. We want to thank Dave for coming out and hanging with us. There is reggae. There is Michigan music. We are all here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in. Additionally, Dr. J can be reached at MichiganRock'n'RollLegends.com. Sir Fred can be hit up at FredRife.com. And Scott through ScottBakerMusic.com. You can also search Michigan Music History Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. You've been listening to the MMHP in the 989. From all of us at the podcast,